I guess we just want to tell a little bit about how we joined, and then we'll tell about that trip and tell some nice stories about Prabhupada, some of the things that happened. So I was originally from Minnesota, and I was going to school at the University of Minnesota. And one day I was walking across the street in downtown Minneapolis, and right in the middle of the intersection, a girl sold me a BTG. So I started to read it, and I remember talking to my friend on the phone saying, "Oh, look, it says here, we have to give up our sense gratification. Is that cool or what?" And he said, "Oh yeah, far out." You know, neither of us had any idea what it meant. I still don't, but at least I'm starting to understand what it means to give up our sense gratification. Then when school ended, I was traveling for a year, and I ended up at a temple in Denver, got some books, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Part 1, and went to the Rath Yatra in San Francisco. Srila Prabhupada was not there that year, but I was chanting with the devotees up on the stage for several hours. It was ecstatic. Then traveled through Mexico and danced in front of Radha Madan Gopal in Mexico City, and bought some BTGs and started to pass them out to my acquaintances, etc., friends. And then somehow ended up in Miami, and I went to the Sunday feast, and I never left. So that was in 1974. And Sukha, how did you join?
So I grew up in Michigan. I graduated from a branch of Michigan State, Oakland University. And I started teaching. I taught for a couple of years. I always thought, you know, the world's a mess. The world's a mess, society's a mess, and what can I do to change it? I thought, well, if you work with young people, then it stands to reason that you could make a difference. So that was really what I was thinking of. Of course, when I actually started teaching, and you know, you're so kind of caught in by the government curriculum and everything you're expected to do, that after a couple of years, I thought, you know what, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. So, you know, after all the college and all that, I decided to stop teaching and just travel for a while. Traveled, went to South America, and when I was kind of studying yoga and visiting different yoga ashrams. And when I came back, two friends of mine, Brajendralal, who was also from Detroit, and Mukhya, my good friend since like 1972, they had gone to the Krishna temple, the Detroit temple. So I went to the temple with them, and I remember walking to the temple, and I had the distinct feeling that I'm home. Somehow or other, you know, everywhere I'd been, including my home, didn't really feel like home, but I walked into the temple. It just felt so wonderful. So, you know, I served there for a while, and then went to Miami, where I met Nartaka, and we distributed books in the Miami airport. Well, together for 5 years. She distributed there much longer. Then I moved to Hawaii, my husband and I, and distributed books there for like another, I guess, 15 years. And then I ended up, strangely enough, teaching again. Only the teacher for the devotee children in Alachua was ill. She asked me if I could substitute for her, so I did. And teaching devotee children was so different, and it had so much potential. So I ended up teaching devotee children for the next like 28 years. So wonderful experience. And actually I've met several of my students here who are involved in the 24-hour kirtan and doing different services here. So I'm meeting with some of them tomorrow for lunch. Anyway, it's just so nice. And Nartak and I were actually really fortunate too. As she mentioned, we went on traveling Sankirtan in India with Prabhupada for 5 weeks. And also in 1975, I was on a Sankirtan party with Tamahar. Maybe some of you know him. He's a GBC member, and his wife Mantrini. We went on traveling Sankirtan, also kind of groupies for Srila Prabhupada. We just went from place to place following him as he was touring the East Coast. So I have some stories about that, but why don't you speak?
So we joined at the same time in Miami and started right away to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books, diving into the ocean of nectar. And for the first year, our airport didn't open until 1975. So for the first year, we just did the streets and malls, things like that. And at the end of the first year, my parents had me deprogrammed. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that word. At least the younger people might not be. But what it means is there was this foolish person going around the United States. His name was Ted Patrick. He was like the most famous of the deprogrammers. And there was a group of these people like him. They would, if any parents were upset with what their kids were doing, it could be they want to be a Catholic nun, they want to be a Buddhist, they want to be a Hare Krishna, they want to be anything. You pay them a lot of money and they get your kid, they try to extract your kid from that thought, from that, from the whatever group they want to be. So somehow my parents paid this person a lot of money. They called me home to Minnesota on the ploy that my mother was sick. When I got there, I saw she wasn't very sick, and I was there for 5 days. And the day I was supposed to fly home, all of a sudden this car pulls up, and this man came out, and there was like 9 people in the house against me, and he's trying to, but it was very foolish. He had some tape recording of a devotee that had left the movement with nothing sound, nothing philosophical. It was just nonsense, but it was very hellish because they had me trapped, and in essence they kidnapped me. So I had to stay there. I was kidnapped, and I couldn't leave, and I was held captive for like 3 days, when finally my father hadn't even been going to work. Finally he went back to work, and I talked my mother into, one time I snuck on the phone and I called up the temple, and our temple president was Avirama Prabhu. I don't know if any of you know him. He was here this morning and he left today, but he was our president at the time. He said, just walk out of there. I said, I can't walk out, I'm locked in, Prabhu. He said, just as soon as you get out of there, just call us and I'll have the ticket at the airport for you. So finally, one day I just convinced my mom to let me leave. And it was Minnesota, it was the middle of winter. All I had was the coat on my back, I had $10 in my pocket, and I walked out of there. They had taken away from me my books, my neck beads, my saris, stuff like that, so anything devotional. I walked out of there, and I just called them, and they said, yeah, the ticket's at the airport. So with $10 is exactly what I needed to take a taxi to the airport. And I went out of there. I was paranoid for a while after that.
So I can mention when Srila Prabhupada came to Miami, actually, Bhishma, you were there too, right? It was very ecstatic. We would have class every night underneath the banyan trees. It was a very mystical atmosphere. And there was a lot of devotees that came. I don't know if the Radha Damodar party was there then, when Prabhupada came. They used to come and kind of winter there because it was warm, and they would distribute around there. Anyway, one night I remember a guest asked a question, or devotee, said, Srila Prabhupada, is it true that if someone eats prasadam, they're guaranteed a human life in the next birth? And Prabhupada said, yes, this is true. So all the devotees were like, Haribol, yay, just like cheering, how ecstatic, we've got it made. So when all of that kind of calmed down, Prabhupada was kind of sober, and he said, there's some species of monkeys that are considered human. So when he said that, all the devotees kind of had to think a little bit, like, there might be a little more to this than we thought. I had to get a little more serious. But it was wonderful, just being with Prabhupada. And I remember one day I'd come home from Sankirtan, and we were given instructions like where to go and where not to go, but I didn't remember. So I walked in, and they said, Bhaktin Sandy, come in here. So I went in, And Prabhupada was getting a massage by Shruti Kirti on the veranda. And so there were heads in the window, like one here, one here, one here. So my head went up about here, and we watched Srila Prabhupada getting a massage. And it was incredible. As elderly as he was, his body complexion looked golden, you know, and very, extremely effulgent. So it was, I really felt like every little moment that I have with Srila Prabhupada is really kind of engraved in my consciousness, you know. I think anybody that had that kind of a association that really remembers those moments. I mean, there's a place in, I think it's Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I'm not totally sure who's speaking. Maybe you can help me when the speaker's saying, maybe it's Radharani, that they're going to decorate the moments with sandalwood paste and garlands. Is it Radharani that's speaking? Maybe her moments with Krishna. So I think like that, like just the time. Of course, it's not really just personal association either. The idea is that what is association with Prabhupada? So if you're engaged in service to ISKCON movement and, you know, Srila Prabhupada's mission, then you're hooked up. I mean, you're serving Srila Prabhupada, and you'll have the same kind of transcendental experiences and the same kind of realization. Srila Prabhupada spent so much time at the Radha Damodar temple, and it always feels very emotional for me to go to the Radha Damodar temple in 1976 when we were here. I got to clean the Radha Damodar temple. And when I went in, the last time I was here, the book was open to a page where it said that the Radha Damodar temple is the hub of the universe. So it really struck me a lot. Well, who could think that, you know, because the universe is such a big place. But think of how Prabhupada's, his inspiration, that's where it was, at the Radha Damodar temple. There's a story where this devotee, he keeps hearing at night this crying out, hey Rupa, hey Sanatan, he's calling out. And it's late at night, so this devotee just goes back to sleep. But one night, he hears the calling and there's a full moon. So he looks out the window and he sees Srila Prabhupada. He sees Srila Prabhupada crying out. So Prabhupada said that that's where he got his inspiration, was at the Radha Damodar temple. He would go there and he would pray intensely in front of Jiva Goswami, the father of Transcendental Books Distribution, in front of Rupa Goswami. So, and also, he said it's not like these personalities are gone. Prabhupada had darshan of Rupa Goswami. You know, he saw him and he felt his rays shining upon him. And he knew then that Rupa Goswami wanted what he wanted him to do, you know, kind of confirming what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wanted him to do. So when we pray to these great personalities, Srila Prabhupada and the six Goswamis, to please engage us in their service, that's what it takes. It takes enthusiasm and it takes patience. Prabhupada said, number one, it takes enthusiasm. But also the patience has to be there because it may not happen overnight. So we can all have these transcendental experiences, whether or not we're Prabhupada, direct Prabhupada disciples or not, because we're all in the line of Srila Prabhupada and we're all serving his mission. And just like you said, I thought that was pretty profound just before class started. Maybe you want to repeat that about the TOVP.
Actually, I give the credit to Janani Vasa. I was with him in New York, Radhyatra, and he said that his understanding is that...
Do you want the microphone? Maybe
Parvati will get the room.
Exactly.
I'll get about 20 tablets.
I think this is 10. Let's try it again.
For 20 years, from 1975 to 1995. And we had quite a wonderful team. We had Panchagoda Prabhu, Vijay Prabhu. If you all know Vijay, you must be knowing Vijay Prabhu. We had Radhalingana, Sukura, myself, some other ladies, Andarupa, Haristanu, Dira, some other ladies. So Miami Airport's built like a crescent moon. It's like at least a mile long, so devotees were stationed all along. And as we weren't too far from the ticket counters, and people could always see us collecting Lakshmi, we didn't want them to get envious of that. So they said, Nartaka and Sukara, you distribute this cookie prasadam to all the airport workers. So we would go every week with big plates of cookies and leave them at every airline to distribute among the workers. And they liked the prasadam, of course. And then later on, in later years, who is still the head pujari for Miami, Dharma Prabhu, he's been there for over 45 years, he was making peanut brittle prasadam and individually packaged in plastic, and we would give it to all the workers that walked by us every day. And so that seemed to help quite a bit, because there were a lot of favorable people who liked us a lot, you know. I remember one worker, there's they call them the sky caps, the guys that take your luggage around for you. And this particular man was big, tall, black guy, and came to me one day and said, you know, I always wondered, is what you guys do, is it for real, or is it just some gimmick to make money? He said, so I found one of your books laying around yesterday, and I took it home last night, and I thought, I'm going to read this to see, you know, if this is for real or not. So he said, I read it all night long, and the book that he had, for mass distribution at that time, we were doing 6th Canto Part 1, which is Ajamil, and the Yamadutas. So he said, I read it, and I stayed up all night, and I read that. I said, okay, so what's your verdict? Is this for real or what? And he goes, oh, it's for real. And then, of course, you get another worker he was negative. But you could tell he was like an educated gentleman and somehow a nice person, but he was very skeptical and negative. And he talked to all the devotees up and down the aisle, so you can imagine he was still negative. So finally I said to him one day, what's the story? Don't you believe in God or something? He says, no, I stopped believing in God a while ago. He said, I was in a boat in the ocean with my eldest son, who was 12 years old, and somehow the boat capsized, and he drowned right in front of my eyes. He said, there's nothing I could do because I barely saved my own life. So he was bitter against God. And so, of course, I tried explaining to him, simple Bhagavad Gita philosophy, the soul is not slain when the body is slain, and different. He wasn't buying any of it, or he wasn't accepting it. He was still bitter. So then, a few days later, at the temple, one of the Matajis said to me, Nartaka, my daughter wants to go out with you. Her daughter was 12 years old. She wants to go out and see Sankirtan in action. Can she go with you? I said, yeah, sure, she can come. She can hold my books for me. So the daughter came out with me. And he happened to walk by that day when the daughter was there. And he was a little curt with her, not very, pleasant or something. So after he left, she said, what's the matter with that guy? So I explained to her how his son had died and he was bitter against God, And she said to me, but it's his karma. You have to tell him that. Did you tell him it's his karma? I said, okay, So then the next day, the man walked by, and he said, I can't believe you did that. I said, really, did what? He said, I can't believe that you brought that young child in here and subjected her to this, like it was child labor or something, child abuse, bringing her in the airport to watch Sankirtan. So I said, you want to know what she said? She asked me why you were so grouchy, and I told her what had happened with your son. And this is what she said. She said, you have to tell him it's his karma. I explained that to him. And it was like something struck him. He was like shook up. And from that day on, he changed. He was a changed person. You know, he actually, something hit him inside. You know. Do you have any?
Yeah. There was another. Do you have a question? Oh, sorry. There was another story. In the airport, when we distributed, they made a rule, like let's say, you know, we were distributing right here. They had to have an imaginary line, and if you crossed the line, you had to go home. They'd say, okay, you crossed the line. It was like really juvenile, but that's how it was. You know, you cross the line, you got to go home. There was one man that was always just waiting for us to cross the line so he could send us home. So it happened a lot, and it'd be a real drag. You're on the Christmas marathon, and you're really fired up, and you're distributing lots of books, but you just barely crossed the line. You had to go home. So anyway, so many years later, I was at the Gurukul I was teaching, and I saw a man walk up on the porch. And you know, I was keeping my eye on him because I didn't recognize him. He came to the door, so I went to the door and I said, "Can I help you?" He goes, "Yes, I'm looking for Mahatma." I said, "Oh, well, she's not here. You know, she went to visit her family in Mexico." He says, "Wait a minute. I know who you are. You're Sukara, Sandra Elsie." And it was that man from all those years ago who used to kick us out of the airport. And he remembered my legal name and my devotee name. And he was now a friend of the devotees. So we sat down and had prasadam together. So it's amazing what the power of prasadam and books distribution can do. And the compassion of the devotee. This year when I was in Europe, I visited several places. One place was Radhadesh. And it was so interesting for me to ask people how they became devotees. So I asked this one girl, you know, how'd you become a devotee? She said, well, I was very, very young, and there was a Harinam party. And all the devotees were chanting. They were giving out prasadam to everybody and books to everybody. She goes, and I wanted some of the candy they were giving out so bad, she said, but they never gave me any. But they gave my mom and dad a book. So when she got to be like 17, she saw the devotees again. And she kept that book the whole time. So when she saw the devotees, she went up to the devotees and she started talking with them. And she joined up and, you know, she became a full-on temple devotee. So the impression that, you know, the Hare Krishna mantra has on the heart and the effect that Srila Prabhupada's books have is really incalculable. We don't really know. Srila Prabhupada said, even if you touch the book, so even sometimes we might meet someone who wasn't so favorable, we'd at least try to get him to touch the books. We say, well, here, hold, you know, this is for you. Oh, well, I don't want that. Okay, well, even if you take it back, he's already touched the book. It's too late. It's like playing tag. You're it. You know, he's already got it. And also a devotee's compassion. Like I met one young man, asked him how he became a devotee, and he said he lived in a very dysfunctional home situation. His mom and dad were separated. His mom was with a new husband who wasn't very nice to him, and so finally he decided, that's it, I'm leaving. So he left home. He started living on the streets and doing things that street people do, you know, taking drugs and selling drugs. And he'd seen the devotees before and just pretty much thought they were a joke, but heard that they had a good meal. So he decided to go there. And he went and he had the feast, and one of the devotees sat down with him and started talking to him, and talking to him, and talking to him. And that devotee asked him to spend the night. The other devotees in the temple said, no, he's too crazy. He's crazy. Don't invite him back. We don't want him. But this devotee said, don't worry, I'll take care of him. So because of that young man stayed there for 2 years. 2 years at the temple and became a completely changed person. So you just really, you know, also that personal touch. Sometimes someone comes to the temple and they just need that. It's rare in this world to find someone who really cares. And you may even find yourselves, you meet people out on the street or in the world, and you spend a little bit of time with them, and all of a sudden you find they're telling you their whole life story. Because something in you, you know, the Krishna consciousness in you tells that person they can trust you and that maybe you can help them, which devotees can help. So don't ever miss the opportunity of giving a book. Another thing is when Artaka and I first arrived here in 1976 and we're distributing books in Delhi, because we're both so tall, we really gathered a crowd wherever we went. You know, I mean, we would just have huge crowds around us, and they would just be lining up to get a book. So it was a real easy way for it. That's one of the reasons we won the competition. You know, we were in the winners of the competition, and were able to travel to a Life Members House with Srila Prabhupada. But when we came back this time on our 40th anniversary tour, we went to, what was it, Surat Kunj.
Suraj Kund Mela, it's like the largest craft fair in the world. It's in Delhi. They have people from all over the world and all over India selling things.
So we brought some pamphlets. She brought pamphlets, I brought some books, and the same thing happened where people were like surrounding us. They had their cameras out. They were lining up to take pictures. So every time we get a picture taken, they're talking, we get the book out. So it had, you know, Prabhupada's picture. So they'd take a picture, Srila Prabhupada, and then we'd give them a book. So never miss that opportunity. Always, wherever you go, take some books. You don't know. Even we were traveling on some public transportation, and we had some pamphlets, and we'd give it to somebody, and they'd be getting off the bus in some, you know, remote little village, and Nartaka would go, there goes Srila Prabhupada with somebody. So, you know, Prabhupada said these books are like deities, they're powerful. So whenever you get the opportunity to give prasadam, to give books, always take it, because it's magical. It's magical.
So when we came here in 1976, 40 years ago, we first arrived in Calcutta and took the bus immediately to Sridham Mayapur. And I mean, just as soon as we got there, we started to do some seva above working on decorating Srila Prabhupada's Vyasasan. And then remember our god sister Shruti Rupa came down and said that our temple president, Abhirama, wants to see you upstairs. So we started to go upstairs, and then all of a sudden somebody was going, shh. And then we realized it wasn't Abhirama we were going to see, it was Srila Prabhupada. So we went up, and there was Prabhupada sitting in his quarters, and just a couple people in there, one lady, his sister Pishama, and 2 or 3 men. And so, you know, in my mind I was thinking, oh, Prabhupada, can we really see you, you know? And Prabhupada turned his head over and said, yes. He said, yes. So we went in, and I was ecstatic. I mean, Prabhupada didn't even speak English, and he was speaking Bengali to everybody in there. We didn't care. We were in his presence, and we were like in total ecstasy, you know. After having distributed books for such long hours, and finally we were in Srila Prabhupada's presence in Sridham Mayapur. It was like, you know, the perfection of our existence. And so we were with Prabhupada in Mayapur at that time for about 10 days. Then Prabhupada was going to Calcutta. So we went to Calcutta for about 3 days with Prabhupada. And then there was going to be a big pandal in Delhi at the Ram Leela grounds. Is that the name of it? Anybody know? Yeah. So we went there and distributed books all day long, and then at night Prabhupada would come and speak to thousands of people, and they would show the Hare Krishna people movie and distribute prasadam, of course. And after 5 days of that, they said, well, whoever has been distributing books for this whole pandal can go with Srila Prabhupada on traveling Sankirtan. So we got to go with Prabhupada. We had a bus that had about 21 devotees, about approximately, you know, half ladies and half men. And then Prabhupada was in the car in front of us. So first we went to Modi Nagar. It's a town built by Mr. Modi, who Prabhupada talks about sometimes in his purports. He has an industry there, and he employs virtually the whole town. And he built a big temple. It's like a long temple, but it's got, you know, it has Radha Krishna, but it also has Lakshmi Narayan and Bhava Bhavani. It's got Ganapati, you know, it's So it's a long temple. And so what happened when we got off the bus there? They had garlands for all the devotees, and then what happened? They had a...
And they had the whole town band came out, and they were chanting and playing their musical instruments, you know, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And
brass band, means
Yeah.
tubas and everything.
Yeah, the whole works. So Prabhupada was the conductor. Prabhupada started leading the orchestra, you know, as they were singing. So it was very festive and beautiful, you know. Prabhupada was like, he was a hero, you know, when he came back after just being, you know, a simple sage, and he always was a simple sage. But when he came back with all the Westerners, really his godbrothers and all the people of India were completely astounded at what he had done, that he had began this whole worldwide movement. It began right here in Vrindavan. And Prabhupada said all his plans for his movement, it began, you know, right here in Vrindavan. So likewise, our plans, you know, can also originate here. Even though we think ourselves that we can't do it and, you know, we're shy or whatever the reason might be, you can do it. We can all do our little bit or big bit. It's all big, even if it seems little.
Yeah, I mean, one time somebody asked Prabhupada, what is humility? And you know, we always think being humble means to be quiet and shy and meek, etc., like that. And so Prabhupada astonished us all with his answer. He said, humility means to act boldly for Krishna. So, being a Sankirtan devotee, I always thought that meant, well, I mean, some days, you know, we're fired up, and then some days you're on the mental platform and don't want to go out, but you have to push yourself. So you might not want to go out and do the service, but you have to force your mind, you know, into control, and you have to just force yourself to do your service, and that's real humility, because you're acting boldly. You might not even want to act boldly, but you're forcing yourself to, so that's real humility. At that town, Modi Nagar, which is not too far from here, it's between Delhi and Agra, they have a huge, you've seen this picture also in some of the Vyasa Puja books. This here, this is Daivi Shakti's book, Vrindavan is My Home, and it's on page 115. It shows, you can see part of it. It's a solid silver Vyasasan, real silver, and who knows, it weighs a lot, hundreds of pounds, and it's very tall. It's like 7 feet tall. You can't see all of it here, but it's all carved ornately, and Prabhupada spoke at this Vyasasan. So very awesome, to say the least, very amazing. And then after Modi Nagar, from there we all went to Aligarh, which is another town not too far from here. And the devotees were staying in the houses of different life members. They would host like 5 or 6 devotees in each house, like that. And Srila Prabhupada was staying at the home of another life member. And I remember for Mangal Arti, one of the mornings, we all went up on the roof of the house where Prabhupada was staying. And we had Mangal Arti up there running around. I remember Lokanath was there, I think it was before he was a sannyasi. So we were all running around in circles from Mangal Arti up on the roof of the house where Prabhupada was staying. And after the traveling Sankirtan, we came here to Sri Vrindavan Dham. And this is where one of the largest yagyas, here's a picture of it on the inside cover of this book, that while Prabhupada was on the planet here in Vrindavan, that was held, that was when Prabhupada was in good health. Prabhupada was presiding over the yagya. There were 70 devotees in the yagya, and not all firsts, some were second initiation. I received my Gayatri mantra in this yagya, and I know the only other person that I can remember who was in this yagya is His Holiness Bhaktivinoda Swami received Gayatri mantra also in this. And it was right here in the courtyard of Krishna Balaram Mandir, and Srila Prabhupada was there for the whole yagya. And it was, needless to say, totally astounding. And there were so many devotees that we couldn't get Gayatri Mantra right away. I had to wait like 5 days. And so finally, they called the ladies to this house. We received our Gayatri Mantra in Prabhupada's front room here, the room from which he left his manifest presence and entered the spiritual world. And at that time, there were 5 ladies that were going to go in together to get our Gayatri Mantra. And so we all went in there and got Gayatri, and he showed us how to do our fingers, etc. And then they left, but I had brought a gift for him. I was the only person that had brought him a gift, so I stayed in there and everybody else left. And I had made him some wooden shoes, the kind that have a wooden peg that goes by the toes, and I made the peg. I carved it like a lotus petal, a lotus flower with a jewel in the center and gold leafed around the edges of the shoes, and put sandal oil. And I put them in a velvet bag that I embroidered with Srila Prabhupada's name on it. So I gave Prabhupada my gift. I said, Srila Prabhupada, I have a gift for you. So he held up the shoes and he was looking at them. And he said, thank you very much. You know? And then the next day when I went in, I found the shoes up on the mantle in that room. He had put them up on the mantle. And I brought him some flowers too. We were staying at Prabhupada's friend's house, which is over on the Parakram Marg. I think now they turned it into an ashram, but at that time we had about at least 20, 25 ladies staying there. And one day, Prabhupada is so kind, to pay back the man for letting us stay there, Prabhupada went to lunch at his house, I remember. And the man was a pretty big worshiper of Lord Shiva, so he had a lot of flowers growing in his compound, and he had also the hibiscus flowers, which I didn't realize at the time, because I brought Prabhupada a few flowers along with my gift, and a couple of them were hibiscus, some were just regular marigolds. But I said, and I put the flowers on his desk. He didn't say anything, but I know the next person that brought him some hibiscus flowers was one of the men brought Prabhupada 2 hibiscus flowers, and Prabhupada told him, he said, these flowers you do not offer to the Guru. These are meant for Devi Puja, Lord Shiva and Devi. And then the devotee looked a little crestfallen, so he said, well, what should I do with these then, Prabhupada? And so Prabhupada just picked them up and put one behind each ear. So these big flowers are sticking out. And he had a big smile, so the devotee felt better. But he didn't yell at me or tell me anything. So that's how I got my Gayatri Mantra, by Krishna's mercy. And so that was our trip to India.
I remember in Calcutta, and then he said, you tell him what's done is done, he should come back. And he said that 3 times throughout the conversation. It really struck me. He said, you tell him that what's done is done, he should come back. So, there's so many stories in Bhagavatam and also with Prabhupada that, devotees would do something wrong, commit an offense, but Prabhupada was always extremely forgiving and asking them. I could just see he was so pained that one of his first sons, Shamasundar, who had done so much for him, had, temporarily left, and he was so sad because, Prabhupada considers every one of his children, and he doesn't want everyone to leave. He wants everyone to be very linked up. Also, one day we were all going on different places, Parikram, different places in Vrindavan, and one of the places we went to was Radhakund, and on the way back from Radhakund, it was towards the late afternoon, our bus broke down. And it was taking a very long time. You know how it is in India, to fix something, it can take a long, long time. I don't know if you were there, Narayani, no. So in the meantime, all the other buses are returning, and Prabhupada's like, well, where are the women, And nobody really knew where we were at that point. And Prabhupada, we heard later that he stayed up and waiting for us to get home. And when we finally did get home, he had tears in his eyes. And he said, I'm afraid that when I'm gone, that my devotee women won't be protected. So I felt that was very, very significant, how important it is. Because in Vedic culture, women were protected, and that doesn't mean, locked up or prevented from, it just means that they're watched out for. They're watched out for health-wise and every wise. So I thought that was a very significant, important story that we shouldn't forget. Because Prabhupada he gave so much mercy to his women disciples. I think probably everyone's heard the story about Malati when, Prabhupada was criticized sometimes for his, just his kind of revolutionary ways. I mean, he opened ashrams for women, and that had never really been done before. And he in so many ways, he led his women disciples. They went out and distributed books all day. He encouraged us to do that. He said these girls are not ordinary girls. Even when the topic of the brain size comes up, where Prabhupada said, the men have, 64-ounce brains or 32, I can't remember, and women have 16. But he turned to the devotee women. He said, but not these women. So important to remember that we're all spirit souls, we're all servants of Krishna. And sometimes, Krishna uses, some of his women devotees to do very special service, just like this devotee who is a senator. What's her name? Gabbard. Yeah, Tulsi Gabbard, doing amazing service by, presenting the Bhagavad Gita. She's giving addresses with Bhagavad Gita verses first. So it's important for us to remember that very, very simple aphorism that's kind of the basis of our philosophy, which is, I'm not this body, I'm spirit soul. So when Malati was serving Srila Prabhupada in front of his godbrothers, and even that could be criticized, and they maybe were looking askance at Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said something like, I would give my life for this devotee, and she would give her life for me.
He actually said cut the throat.
Oh, cut the throat, right. Yeah.
So the big yagya was held here 40 years ago, in 1976, on April 4th. And then 2 days later, in this very room where we all are now, they opened up a branch of the Punjab National Bank. And that's what this photo is right here on this pillar. If you read the caption, they're opening the bank. And you may have all heard the story, but I'll mention it in case a few people didn't. They had a big function. A lot of the banking officials were here, and devotees also, and VIPs from Vrindavan. Open a bank, it doesn't sound a very big deal now, because if foreigners come and want to change money, you can't walk 6 feet practically without somebody saying you want to change dollars or you want to change rupees. Yeah, everywhere, downtown, all over, across the street, everywhere. At that time, believe it or not, there was no place. If you wanted to change money, you would take your rickshaw all the way down to the State Bank of India and maybe have to wait 2 hours for them to change it. Believe it or not, there was no place to go. No signs up, change money here. No, sorry, didn't exist. Bottled water didn't exist, okay? Did not exist, okay, back then. Try to understand, it was completely different. So they were having the function. This room was full of dignitaries and Prabhupada. And Prabhupada decided that he would tell a story that deals with bankers. So he told a story from the 4th canto about Dhruva Maharaj. Not when he was young, but when Dhruva was grown up. When Dhruva was grown up, his brother Uttama was killed. He went out hunting and he was killed by a yaksha. And Dhruva became enraged. And anger overtook him, and he decided to go out and kill all the yakshas. So he was killing them like anything. And his grandfather, Swayambhuva Manu, came to him and he said, why are you doing this wholesale slaughter? It was only one yaksha. that killed your brother, and you're killing many, many innocent yakshas. This must desist. You have to stop this. And then from his grandfather, then Dhruva became embarrassed and realized, why am I doing this? This is unnecessary. So he felt foolish and he was humbled. So then the banker of the demigods, Kuvera, came, and because Kuvera is actually the head of the yakshas also, he was very pleased with Dhruva for stopping the wholesale slaughter. So he appeared to Dhruva and he said, I am very pleased with you for stopping this killing when your grandfather asked you to. Immediately you stopped. So as the banker of the demigods, I would like to offer you whatever you want. And my coffers are practically unlimited, so you tell me what you want and it's yours. And of course, because Dhruva Maharaj was a pure devotee, what did he want? He said, yes, I would like to ask you for a boon. And the boon that I want from you is that I always remember the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and render devotional service unto them. So Srila Prabhupada turned to the bankers and he said, so similarly, we would like to ask the local Kuvera, the local banker, we would like to ask the local Kuvera for the same boon, that we can remember the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and serve him with pure devotional service. So that was in this very room 40 years ago, almost to the day, give or take a month. And the bank was in here for a few years and then they moved it. But it was a wonderful ceremony and we were here for that ceremony. I was reading the conversation books. If you've seen, there's like 36 volumes, and there's some very interesting, some stories you don't hear elsewhere in there. So in one conversation, Srila Prabhupada was saying that when I was a young man, I climbed to the top of the Victoria Memorial on the scaffolding while they were building it. Now, if anybody knows the Victoria Memorial, it's in Calcutta. It's 180 feet high. 180 feet is pretty high. At that time, it was the largest building in all of Eastern India. It was the highest building, means in all of Eastern India. Now, of course, we're building TOVP, which is higher, but it was 180 feet, which is many, many stories. If you go outside and look at the top of this guest house, and then triple it. That's how Prabhupada climbed on the scaffolding. If you're from the West, scaffolding in Europe and America means steel, iron. In India, that's not what scaffolding is. Scaffolding here means what? Bamboo, and sometimes they even, in either rope or it's hemp, or they'll use even the creepers from trees, right, to tie it with. And 180 feet, I can't even imagine. The Prabhupada said he did. And they built the Victoria Memorial from the year 1906 to 1921, a 15-year period. So during that period, Prabhupada was between the ages of 10 and 25. So he didn't say how old he was. I would just imagine he was somewhere between 18 and 21 when he did it, So anyway, Prabhupada did that. Climbed to the very top of the Victoria Memorial on the scaffolding, and one of the devotees said, Srila Prabhupada, you must have been very brave. And Prabhupada said, yes, I am still brave. Otherwise, how could I come to the West to preach to all of you alone? I came alone, And then Prabhupada continued, the astrologer said, to achieve his objective, this boy will enter fire. Let me see, we have a few minutes left. I wanted to tell one story of one of the ladies in Alachua was going to get initiated. This was in about 1971, maybe 72, 71, 72. And her friend, the devotee friends would ask her before her initiation, you know, what do you think your spiritual name is going to be? And she would say, oh, you know, she was kind of humble, so she would say, oh, probably Maya Devi, because I'm always in Maya, you know. So they had the yagya, and you know what yagya is? Everybody's probably been in a yagya, right? Diksha, initiation yagya. When any guru, let alone Prabhupada or any guru gives the name, you know, your name is Krishnadas, everybody is Jai, right? Everybody erupts, Jai. It never fails, you know. So Srila Prabhupada gave her your name. Your name is Mahamaya Devi. And you could have heard a pin drop. There was no Jai, no nothing. There was dead silence. And then Prabhupada continued, just as there are different phases of the moon, Mahamaya is one of the different phases of Radharani's energy. And then everybody said, Jai. And I noticed that they said they welcomed Daddy Baksha this morning. Was it? And I thought I glimpsed him for a second. He's an old friend from Juhu Temple. I lived there for 5 years, and he made thousands of life members. Wonderful devotee. And I know that the story of how he got initiated, very unusual. So I'll tell that story. The devotees were circumambulating Krishna Balaram Mandir, which means right around here, walking around. And there were maybe 20 devotees following Prabhupada. Some sannyasis in the front, the bigger devotees in the front, and then the newer devotees in the back. And Dadi Bhaksha Prabhu was way at the back because he's a newer devotee. And of course, this was so many years ago, almost 40 years ago. So Srila Prabhupada was saying how if you circumambulate the temple, it's actually what was his actual quote? Anyway, it's like going to all the holy places in the universe, And then Prabhupada was talking and he said, and so Krishna likes milk sweets. And from way in the back, Dadi Bhaksha yells out, I like milk sweets, Srila Prabhupada. He's a very sweet devotee, simple and sweet, So all the devotees turned around, kind of glared. Some of the devotees kind of glared at him. Who is this, saying that? And Prabhupada goes, you like milk sweets. So your name is Dadi Bhakshadas. And that's how he got initiated. So if you see him, you can ask him. And I mean, sometimes people say, why, people that aren't devotees especially, why do you love your spiritual master so much? What is it that invokes that deep feeling of dedication? You've given your whole life practically. How is that? Well, it's just like, if the temple commander comes up to you and says, oh, Prabhu, I have a new seva for you. I want you to get up at midnight every night for the rest of your life and do this service. How many people, it's like, actually we have kirtaniyas now that work the 1 to 4 a.m. shift, so that's pretty selfless and wonderful. But Prabhupada got up every night at 12:30 for us to distribute the books. And Sukha, you want to tell that story about here at Krishna Balaram Mandir? Well, yes. Well, how was it? You got up early?
Yes, so I would get in the morning early and chant my rounds. And just walking by, I looked in the window and there was Srila Prabhupada, translating as he did every morning. Just he'd go to bed at 10. Of course, the spiritual master's not really sleeping. He's just resting. He's just thinking of Krishna, kind of getting ready to distribute his books. But he was there every morning, very busy schedule. There was another story when he was in the Radha Damodar temple. I guess that'll be the last story. where someone came to clean his room. And this person was trying to do a thorough job and noticed the cobwebs, and so he started, being careful that he didn't kill the spiders, but taking down the cobwebs. And when Srila Prabhupada came back, he looked around the room and he immediately looked up and saw the cobwebs were gone. And he said, "What have you done?" And immediately the cleaner became nervous. He was like, "Well, I was just cleaning, the cobwebs." He goes, "You are a new resident. They have been here for so long." He says, "You have no right to disturb." And he goes, okay, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. But again, it kind of reminds us where we are in Vrindavan Dham, and how every living entity, including every little rascal monkey, hard to see them sometimes, but are very special residents. So we want to just take every opportunity to protect ourselves from them, but maybe not. But remember that they're residents of Vrindavan.
We have another god sister, Purnamasi. You know Purnamasi? So in 1972 or 73, she was helping to cook Prabhupada's lunch in Los Angeles Temple, and Prabhupada was there personally. And every day they would make nice lunch for Prabhupada: chapati, dal, rice, chutney, pakoras, salad, so many nice things, kachoris. And that morning in class, Prabhupada had just made just a side statement. He said, "Man can live alone on coconuts, bananas, and milk." So she was thinking about that when she was preparing Prabhupada's lunch. And coconuts, bananas, and milk. I know, I'll make for Prabhupada. She made him a salad with coconuts, bananas, and whipped cream. So they served Prabhupada his nice elaborate Rajbhoga lunch that day, and she also brought out a bowl of her whipped cream delight, And that day, Prabhupada didn't touch any of his regular, he just ate 2 bowls of her. Yeah. We have another friend, Sumati. In 1971, she was in Boston. They were recording for a radio station, Krishna book stories. And the radio station would play the story, and also they had the tapes, the cassette tapes, and they would mail them to Srila Prabhupada. So they were doing the story of Kaliya's serpent, and Sumati was Jashoda, and Satsvarup was Krishna on the tape. And so little Krishna, just a young kid, went out into the poisonous lake where even the birds flying over would drop in dead, and if the cows drank and the calves drank, they would pass out or die. And so Krishna went in to jump on the head of the serpent, and Mother Jashoda was on the shore, and they had to restrain her. She was screaming. It's not that she thought, "Oh, Krishna's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I don't have to worry about it at all." No, because she was absorbed in his internal potency, and she's thinking, "He's my delicate little son, and he's going to die." So she was screaming, "Krishna!" She was screaming very loudly on this tape. So when Prabhupada heard that, Prabhupada said, "Tell her she should always cry for Krishna like that." So I kind of tease her sometimes when we're chanting japa in the temple room. I tell her, she's just chanting like normal. I said, "Prabhupada said you have to always cry to Krishna like that. So let's hear how loud you were doing it." She said, "I couldn't scream that loud. If I did, everybody would stare at me and fall over." She was very loud in the tape. I thought this was really nice. There was a newspaper called the International Times. And do they still have that newspaper in the big city, International Times? I don't know. But they had a photo of the devotees chanting, and they had an article about the power of the Maha Mantra. And this was the headline on the newspaper. The headline read, "Beautiful blue smiling cowherd boy steals their hearts." How nice is that compared to like the news of terrorists today and mass murders, etc.
And there was another more recent news story, and the caption, I don't know if any of you heard of it, it was called, "Are we all Hare Krishnas now?" And the way this article went, it was saying that even though you don't see so many Hare Krishnas at the airport now, how many of you are practicing yoga and meditation? How many of you are eating a vegetarian diet? How many of you, if you're engaged in kirtan or bhajan, he was kind of saying, and this was not a devotee who wrote the article, this was like a layman who wrote the article, but basically he was saying that the Hare Krishna movement has infiltrated the world so much that it's changed the world. And that's how he came up with the title, Are We All Hare Krishnas Now? So I thought that was such an ecstatic article. I couldn't believe it when I read it. I was like, wow, because it's true. Prabhupada said that Hare Krishna would become a household word. And when we first were involved with Krishna consciousness, being a vegetarian was still kind of weird, right? It was kind of strange. And kirtan, nobody heard of it. So, and yoga also was like, kind of strange. So, and now all these things, everywhere you go, yoga, even on the airplanes, there's vegetarian entrees. So, Prabhupada has completely changed the world, and through prasadam, through passing out books, and through Harinam. Those are the three main ways. So, every time, we are the ones that are able to change the course, the future, by engaging in these kinds of activities. When we go in Harinam, Prabhupada said the holy name goes around the world like 6 times, and he said it purifies everything. The trees, the people, the birds. So let's keep up the good work, I guess.
Several of us were over at Gargamuni's house today because it happens to be his birthday. So we were over there. We had a little birthday cake made by Govinda, very beautiful and wonderful birthday cake. And it reminded me of this story because he was showing us movies from the early days, 1966. And he showed us a movie with Chutananda in it. And we could not he lives where we live now in Alachua. We could not recognize him, believe me. Oh my gosh, he looks so different. So in 1970, do all of you know who Chutananda? He was a sannyasi, and he actually compiled our songbook. And he was very famous in those days for the singing Bengali bhajans very beautifully, So in 1970, he was with Srila Prabhupada in Calcutta. And somehow he got into a debate with one of the life members. And the debate was, who is more important, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Lord Sri Krishna? So they got into this debate. One of them was saying Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the other one was saying, no, it's Lord Sri Krishna. And they went back and forth. But finally, Srila Prabhupada entered the room, and they explained to him, Prabhupada, we have this dilemma here. Can you please help us out? He's saying that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is more important, and I'm saying Lord Sri Krishna is more important. So Srila Prabhupada just looked at them both, and he said one word. He said, Radha. And I just like this story so much. It shows how many of you have read Brahmananda's book, Brahmananda Prabhu's book? There's one story in there, if maybe some haven't heard it. It just exhibits why Srila Prabhupada loved him so much. He did so much for Prabhupada in the early days. And so in about 1967, it must have been then, they in New York, the devotees had the Happening album out. And they put an ad in the newspapers like the East Village Other or the Village Voice. The ad said, we have this wonderful yoga album. If you want it, send the money and your address to us, and we'll mail you the album. So every day they would get requests with money to mail the album. So one day, Brahmananda told Prabhupada, oh look, the address on this person that wants the album is from Manhattan right here. And not only that, he's from Macmillan Publishers. So Prabhupada said, do not mail that album. You bring it in person to deliver it. And then Prabhupada instructed him, you tell him, I am a disciple of a guru from India, and he has a Bhagavad Gita to publish. They will publish. So Brahmananda, actually, he had been trying to publish Prabhupada's manuscript, and they were getting rejected by, it was a big manuscript, and people just weren't prepared to publish it, so he was a little discouraged. But when he heard this, okay, so he went there. When he was outside of Macmillan Publishing Company, it's a big skyscraper, very impressive, and his hopes were very high. But then when he went inside, he became discouraged immediately when he realized that the person who had ordered the album was just a low-level employee, like a clerk. He didn't have wasn't a big executive or anything. So he was giving him the album in his office, and all of a sudden, an executive walked in. And Brahmananda was introduced to the executive, and immediately, of course, Brahmananda perfectly said what Prabhupada told him to say, I am a disciple of a guru from India, and he has a Bhagavad Gita to publish. And the man said, what? We are publishing a series of spiritual books, and we need a Bhagavad Gita. You bring in the manuscript, and we will publish it, sight unseen. So the next day, Srila Prabhupada personally brought the manuscript in. And that's how the first ISKCON book got published by a professional publishing house. Before that, it was Srila Prabhupada publishing, self-publishing his books. So that's... And another reason why Prabhupada loves Brahmananda so much was that he was a wrestler in high school in 1960. And at some point, he broke a blood vessel in his neck. And you get some insurance payment when you get injured. But the insurance payment didn't come until 1967, long time later, when he was already a disciple of Prabhupada. So he told Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I got $5,000 and I want to give it all to you. What shall I do? Now, in those days, so just about 50 years ago, the money was, $5,000 was worth like $50,000 now, which means with $2,500, you could buy a brand new car. Now, a brand new car in America is $25,000, 10 times that. So he could have bought 2 brand new cars with that money, but he gave it all to Prabhupada. Prabhupada told him, you have the manuscript of Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, so you send it to Japan, how Prabhupada said, and publish it. So he did so, and later he rented a U-Haul and went to the dock and picked up all the books when they were... So I thought that was very astounding. And I don't know if you all read, Mukunda Maharaj had a wonderful book out, and some of you I'm sure read that, very enlightening book. And in 1967, again, in San Francisco, someone asked Srila Prabhupada, are you Allen Ginsberg's guru? Is there anybody who doesn't know who that was? And he was a famous poet back then, and he actually had gone to India and was chanting some Hare Krishna. So they asked Prabhupada, are you Allen Ginsberg's guru? Like, in America, he was quite well known. And Prabhupada said, this is how humble, I am nobody's guru. I am everybody's servant. And then, in a very low voice, almost to himself, but Mukunda was standing right next to him, so he heard it, Prabhupada said, actually, I am not even a servant. A servant of God is no ordinary thing. So, humble, like anything. One thing I wanted to mention here, this is Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada said, this Krishna Balaram Mandir is 100 times every other temple in the world. I'll mention this too because Avi Ram was here this morning, and he was our first temple president. So in 1977, when Prabhupada was in England, just before he came back to Vrindavan, on his last journey in the physical form, so he was in the UK, and Avi Ram Prabhu was massaging him, and Prabhupada was totally ill, very, very sick, you know. So Prabhupada told Avi Ram Prabhu, no matter what happens, my death must be glorious. No tubes or pipes. And some of the doctors said, we don't know how this man is not screaming in agony, in pain. He's not at all. And anybody else with this physical condition, it's intolerable, the pain, but Prabhupada was not, you know. So one day, Srila Prabhupada in England at that time, Prabhupada told Pradyumna, he had a dream in which he saw the Vishnu Dutas coming to take him to the spiritual world. But they were fair-skinned and blue-eyed, like his Western disciples, the Vishnu Dutas. So basically, oh yeah, I have to tell this story too because this is very sweet. The devotees were, I've told this story a lot, so the devotees were at Tittenhurst Park, John Lennon's estate in the UK. It was like 1968 or 69, and Prabhupada, the room was full, and Prabhupada looked at one devotee and said, so, Ishan, are you remembering Krishna? And Ishan was like, well, Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, that is all right. You just remember me remembering Krishna. And so then, about 3 months ago, and Alachua, there was an elder devotee walking there for a while, a few weeks, and finally after about a week, I went up to him and I said, Prabhu, you know, what's your name? He said, my name is Ishan. I said, what? Are you Prabhupada's Ishan? And because I had told this story a few times. And he said, yeah. He said, yeah, I was living at Tittenhurst Park. Actually, I got the story from Trivikram Maharaj. So he said, yeah, Trivikram and I were both living at Tittenhurst Park, John Lennon's estate. And on alternate days, we would each massage Srila Prabhupada. And after a while, after a few weeks, Trivikram came to me and said, you know, Prabhu, I really feel like I'm getting in the groove of massaging Prabhupada, or getting the hang of it and understanding how to do it really well. So I'm thinking it might be best if I just do it every day, so as not to lose the flow of things, you know. So, I mean, how would you feel, you know, you have the most nectar service in the universe and someone wants to, you know, take it out from under your feet, take the service away from you. So Ishan was, So he went to so he was massaging Prabhupada that day. So he asked Srila Prabhupada, well, Srila Prabhupada, you know, Trivikram says like this, that maybe he should just be the only one to massage me, just massage you. How do you feel about that? And so Prabhupada's, you know, laying on his stomach and being massaging his back. So Prabhupada just lifted up his hand and said 4 words. He said, any fool can do. So Ishan didn't have to give up her service. Okay, so Ishan then also was living in New York later, and a few years later. And at that time, he didn't have as much, you know, Prabhupada wasn't as accessible as before because there were lots of other devotees, new devotees, and you know, previously he could talk to Prabhupada every day, you know, in the early days. But now he couldn't. So he was feeling a little upset by that, or distressed, because he was used to having that more of a free relationship with Prabhupada where you could see him more often, and he liked that, you know, so he was feeling kind of heartbroken. So he just went to his apartment a few blocks away, and he stayed there, and he actually said to himself, I'm not going to eat or drink anything until I can see Srila Prabhupada. So he was in his apartment, and the next day a devotee came and knocking on his door. And, Ishan, Prabhu, Ishan, Prabhupada wants to see you. You have to come right away. So he walked into Srila Prabhupada's room, and Prabhupada had prasadam there for him. Yeah. So I thought that was very sweet. But so in October of 1975, Vishal Prabhu, our godbrother, I don't know if any of you know him, he's almost 80 years old, still goes out on book distribution every single day, without fail. Amazing. He was living here for maybe 15 years at that time, and his daughter was the first devotee child born in Vrindavan, first child in the movement born in Vrindavan, so the first Brijbasi, And I think Balagopal's daughter was the second one, right close behind, Dhananjaya's daughter. But so Vishal's first daughter was born, and he went to Srila Prabhupada and he asked him, I understand, Srila Prabhupada, from my godbrothers and godsisters, and I have read in your books that you may leave us sometime. Would you please name my daughter before you leave? So Srila Prabhupada's answer, he said, my spiritual master has never left me. But later he gave the daughter the name. He named her Vrindavaneshwari. And then one time Yamuna Devi, she asked the question, Srila Prabhupada, how many times were you with your Guru Maharaj? Prabhupada's answer, since I met him, I have never been away from him, not for 1 second. So, the best way to be with Srila Prabhupada is by service and separation. Prabhupada said, let us meet by Sankirtan. I do not feel separation from my Guru Maharaj when I am engaged in his service. His pictures give me sufficient strength. To serve the spiritual master's word is more important than to serve him physically. So, actually, in that way, by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, anyone can have and develop an intimate relationship with Srila Prabhupada by reading his books, imbibing the knowledge, and acting on the instructions that he's giving in his books. And so it's not that someone has to come and say, oh, you Prabhupada disciples, you were fortunate to see Srila Prabhupada and be with him sometimes. Actually, no, we weren't with him very much. I mean, I wasn't, but we were with him every single second when we were out on book distribution, distributing his books. That's when I had the most intense relationship with Prabhupada, is distributing his books, going out day after day, when you want to, when you don't want to, pushing yourself to go out and distributing his books. That was the most intense aspect of my relationship with Srila Prabhupada, I feel, getting to serve him like that. Do you want to say anything? So, actually I want to read this first, page 2. Well, Srila Prabhupada told us that every night Before I go to sleep, I pray to Krishna, please protect me from Maya. And then Srila Prabhupada said one time, my devotees flirt with Maya. And I mean, I think sometimes I not only flirt with Maya, I try to embrace Maya. Which is even worse. Flirting is putting it mildly, isn't it? We really get into Maya sometimes. So even Prabhupada was praying like that. So, what to speak? We have to really get serious. One time at Berry Place in London, it was 1973, and our godbrother Yogeshwar, his son lives at our temple in Alachua. Very nice devotee. He gives class to his son. So Yogeshwar shouted, Srila Prabhupada, the temple room was packed. You are Radharani's mercy personified. And everyone said, Jai. And Srila Prabhupada said very softly, again, almost no one heard him, just the person next to him heard him. Prabhupada said, Radharani's mercy contaminated. Humble, humility. So I really appreciate, we just have a couple seconds here, so I appreciate Yamuna Devi. She was visited by a young sannyasi disciple of a different guru. And he told Yamuna Devi that Srila Prabhupada had only given us the ABCs of Krishna Bhakti. And then he even added that unless she joined his guru's mission, she wouldn't make any spiritual advancement. He's talking to Yamuna Devi. He's talking to the wrong person, or you could say the right person. This is her answer to him. When I feel as though I have understood 1/10,000th of a drop of the ocean of what Srila Prabhupada gave us, in however many lifetimes that takes me, then by his grace, he may give me more. So I'd like to thank you all for your patience and kindness. And please bless us that we can always remember the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and render devotional service. Anybody have any questions or comments or additions, subtractions? Yes, Prabhu?
Just Sukada Mataji, she mentioned about being enthusiastic, and Narotaki Gopal, she mentioned about being serious. So I just wanted to hear more development on these two.
I mean, they kind of go together. Because in order to be enthusiastic, you have to be serious about your sadhana. And that's really where, the enthusiasm comes from. You get up early and you go to Mangala Artik, chanting good rounds in the morning. It kind of is the fuel that keeps us going all day and allows us to become an instrument, just like with Arjuna, nimitta matram. Krishna just become an instrument for Krishna. So if we're serious about our sadhana, I think automatically the enthusiasm will come. And again, with the prayer, just like Srila Prabhupada praying to, Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, to be able to carry out his spiritual master's orders, that also helps. Does that help? Okay.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Just last thing you read about that devotee glorified Prabhupada. Prabhupada said Radharani's mercies.
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
Prabhupada said, you are Radharani's mercy personified. Okay. And Prabhupada said, Radharani's mercy contaminated.
Why?
See,
His humility.
see, Prabhupada's being humble. They said, Prabhupada, you are Radharani's mercy personified, you know. And Prabhupada said, no, I am Radharani's mercy contaminated. Yeah, means like just the opposite. But obviously, no, he is Radharani's mercy personified. And anyway, Govinda, Devi, Govinda is the original Russian Mataji at Vrindavan ISKCON. She's been here for 26 or 7 years, and you show steadiness and enthusiasm. So you're the example. That's the answer to your question. She's the original Russian Mataji. At this time, she's been here that long, steadily. Amazing.
Hare Krishna. I was wondering, you mentioned respecting the women devotees. As men, how are we supposed to respect or have that association? Because there's supposed to be a separation also. So, I personally feel that most of the women devotees don't get the respect which they deserve. But I see them, they're like amazing examples. At the same time, I want to, learn from them, associate with them, but at the same time, there is these guidelines. So I was wondering if you can throw something on that.
Well, I just feel, for example, you give me the impression of being an educated, intelligent, coming from a good family in India, right? Are you from India? Yes. So I'm sure you're raised with lots of love in your heart for your mother, right? So Prabhupada said, you should see the lady devotees as the goddess of fortune. Don't see them as the object of your sense gratification. But also, for you, you should see the ladies as your mother. Matravat, how does that go? That Chanakya Pandit? That you should see all other women as your mother, except for your wife, So I'm sure you have lots of love in your heart for your mother. I can tell you're very Brahminical and very Paka devotee. You have a lot of love for your mother. So see the ladies that have the same respect for them as you have for your mata. I don't know if that helps or if it answers it, but I just feel, it's something you can relate to because you have lots of love in your heart for your own mother. So see the ladies like that. Do you want to add anything? Does that help?
Then the guidelines are obvious, really. You know what I mean? The respect, but a certain formality, but at least that, will be there. I remember when Prabhupada was in Calcutta, he was talking about Chanakya Pandit, and he mentioned that a devotee sees everyone's property as so much garbage in the street. He sees every woman as his mother, except for his wife, and he sees everyone's problems as his own. And that's really something that the Vaishnava, that's how he feels. It's not like, that's your problem. That's like a typical phrase that people do, it's not my problem, but really, everyone's problems as his own. And a Vaishnava is trying to solve, the problems of birth, death, disease, and old age, the real problems of life.
So thank you very much.